I just love that song. Thanks for indulging me. That is from Maverick. That's the new version of Top Gun. So nothing against the 80s version Top Gun. Wanted to start off the day with you. Perfect song for a great kickoff. So thank you for joining us. Speaking of songs, though, Sarah had an alternative song to suggest for you all today. So I'm going to play that real quick. So yeah, that was a little Duran, and we do feel like there is something that you should know about KESA. So thanks, Sarah, for a wonderful suggestion for a song. You know, it is also National Duran Day, so we got a double beat there. So welcome. Thank you all for joining us. We are recording this, so if you have to jump off for some reason, I know that happens. You'll be able to access this recording at a later date. Just a little bit of housekeeping as a check-in, please. If you could have the KESA lead for your district, whoever leads KESA, the point person for KESA in your district, if we could have them put in the chat their name,
we could go ahead,
the school district name, and the email address. Again, your KESA point of contact in the chat. Name, school district name, and email. That would be wonderful. If you're listening to this as a recording, please email that information to accreditation@ksde.org. Again, if you're listening as a recording later, please send that information to accreditation@ksde.org. We would ask with quite a sizable group in here today that you would stay on mute for the entire time. If you have questions as they come up, please place those in the chat. Sarah and I and Amber will be tag teaming on this presentation, but we'll be monitoring the chat when we're not presenting. So thank you again for joining us. Today, what we want to talk about is a couple things. What is KESA? Why improve it? We want to talk a little bit about the past, the current state and future state of KSDE, KESA, mixing up my acronyms this morning pretty early. But the focus of today will be on the current state this year. And so we will finish with some expectations for all systems this year, what we're calling the learning year. And then we'll obviously talk next steps as you go on with the rest of your day. So we want you to walk away today with these feelings. We want you to be excited, not excited about KESA, but excited that this is a continuation of the work that you've been doing, right? It's a continuation. It's not something brand new that we're starting. It's continuing the work. So we want you to be excited about the work you've done and the work you're about to embark on. We want you to be confident and clear with the expectations for this school year for KESA. Walk away with a lot of confidence. We know what we're doing. We know what we're tasked with, what we need to accomplish this year in KESA. And we also, this is a big piece, we want you to walk away affirmed that we listened and responded to what you said needed to happen to improve KESA. So we want to make sure we're clear with that. We really want you to walk away excited, confident, and affirmed from this session today. As we put the finishing touches on the first cycle of KESA, and let me just say, wow, there's 350 plus systems that actually completed the first cycle of KESA as of basically this summer. And I just want to thank you all for all the hard work that you put into this process. We know it's not easy. And I think we all understand that the work of continuous improvement in schools is never going to be easy. It's always going to be very difficult. Are you seeing my screen, Sarah? Okay. So I like this old proverb from India that nothing grows under a banyan tree. So if you think about it, in the shade under that banyan tree, it kind of reminds me of that tree of life in Disney. But if you just stay in the shade, that's comfortable. It's safe. You know what to expect. But we all know that that's not where growth happens, right? Stagnation happens if you stay in the shade all the time. So when you step out into the light, that's where things get risky. They get uncomfortable, right? And there are some things that are unknown, and it's hard. But I think it's important. I was listening to a podcast that Ben Proctor sent me on. It's Craig Groeschel, the leadership podcast. Very good podcast, by the way, Craig Groeschel. And he was talking about sustaining momentum in your organization. And I think that's an important topic right now, momentum. The momentum that you generated through the first cycle of KESA, how can you keep that moving forward? Or maybe you need to get it restarted. Craig talked about, if you want to grow and stay and sustain that momentum, you've got to put a disproportionate amount of time and energy into fighting the gravitational pull of what's known, what's safe, what's easy, and what's comfortable. And so I think we could all agree that continuous improvement, which is KESA is continuous improvement. It demands everyone staying in that growth zone. And so that's your staff, that's all your students as we move forward. So this is our team, talking about a team that tries to stay in the growth zone. This is our team, and I'm going to have Amber and Sarah introduce themselves. Before that, I will introduce Catherine Schmidling. She's our assistant director for teacher preparation. So she actually reviews the programs for teacher prep at the higher ed level. She also is part of the KSDE accredits the higher ed teacher prep programs. Catherine does all that work on our team. Myron Melton, who could not be with us today, is our assistant director for KESA. So he's working on that K through 12 accreditation piece. My name is Jay Scott. I serve in the role of Director of Accreditation and Design. So I'll turn it over to Amber.
Okay, so I'm Amber Miller, and this is my first year at KSDE. I come from a service center in the southwest part of Kansas. I've worked with KESA for quite a few years now. Super excited to continue the work that you all have been working on. I have a doctorate in educational leadership, and before I was a Southwest Plains consultant and coming to KESA, I worked in special education at High Plains Educational Cooperative. So I'm your Western Kansas girl. I'm from Western Kansas, and I look forward to working with everyone.
Great. Good morning, I'm Sarah Perryman. I am the Northeast Regional Executive, so live in that part of the state and excited to work with systems that are in the Northeast. This is my 6th year at KSDE, so second on the accreditation side, did 3 years in redesign, spent some time in ELA, and before that spent 5 years teaching English and English as a second language there in Topeka. So excited to be with you all today and looking forward to the year ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah and Amber. And so great to have those two on board and starting this new model of regional support. So we're super excited about that. And we're going to talk about that today. So this is our vision as a team. Each system, which is 350 plus systems in Kansas, that number may sound odd to you, but our private systems have a choice of accreditation organizations. And so several of those private systems in Kansas choose KESA for their accreditation, all of our publics, obviously, but each system, around 350 plus, fully accredited. And what that means is that there are the essential structures in place for if you're fully accredited, that means you have the essential structures in place in every classroom so that students have access to quality learning experiences that open the door for in their future for possibilities. So, and for future opportunities. So that's a fully accredited system in Kansas. And our vision is that by 2030, that each system in Kansas would be fully accredited. Our mission is providing support and accountability. Today is an example of that support. The accountability side is important to 350 plus educational systems so that, again, each system can elevate opportunities and reduce limitations for students. KESA has been, and still is, built on the premise that a good process leads to good results. So that's why you will see a continuation of that, looking at process and results as we move forward in accreditation. KESA also is a reflection of the priorities of the state board. And so right now we're doing some reprioritization within KSDE, and we're looking at some things. We're not going to talk much about those. We're going to release those reprioritized initiatives. They're actually not initiatives, like practices that will be the basis of KESA. We're going to release those in October at the annual conference, Friday, October 27th. We'll mention that again before we're gone, but before we're off. But it is a reflection. KESA is a reflection. It's important to reflect the priorities of the state board. It's also an evaluation of the impact systems are making on those priorities. So these are the functions of KESA, ensuring that each system meets expectations for those essential structures that are in place to improve student outcomes. That does include certain areas of compliance, and it also meeting expectations for student outcomes. So let's talk why. Why make improvements to KESA? Well, I think this next slide will not be probably the first time that you've seen this slide, but this is where it starts. It starts with how our students are performing. And when you're looking at student outcomes, this is one view of student outcomes right here. This is state assessment level of performance for 17 and 18 10th graders. So it's about 70,000 students in Kansas. So we've been looking at this data. I think the 19 10th graders will be added to this data set soon. But if you look at this, this tells a story of, in math and ELA, of limitations for our students. You have 44% of the 10th graders in 17 and 18, 44%, the highest percentage of all categories scoring at level 1 in math. We have 38% of students scoring at 38% scoring at level 2 in ELA. And if we broke that down by API, if you broke it into 8 sections, which we're not going to do today, you would see that the highest percentage in ELA is actually top of level 1. So these are concerning data points that we really need to own as a state. Everybody take ownership in this, but this is a major reason why we're changing KESA, we're making improvements. Now, this is the data that we really want to show, and this is correlation data between the level of a student scoring on the state assessments in both ELA and math with their chances, percentages of graduating high school and then going on and meeting one of those 3 post-secondary effective metrics or benchmarks. So you can see at level 1, students that scored in ELA at level 1, 79% of those students graduated high school. 81% of level 1 students graduated. And then you can see the percentages for post-secondary effective rate for ELA at level 1, it was 27%, and 30% for level 1 students that scored at level 1 in math. So you can see the stair-step effect as you move up in levels. But it's important that we look at this data comparatively, right, together, so that we're not just focused on the state assessment, but that is a metric we need to look at and address. So this is one reason why. The other reason is what many of you on here and many across the state shared with us back in the spring of 2022 as to how could we improve KESA. These are just a couple of quotes that we pulled out. We did a qualitative study and had a third party come in and really put together a nice summative report. But these were two quotes that were taken from those focus group feedback sessions about why KESA needed to be improved. You know, the more focused piece, there were a lot of different initiatives going on. And I really love this question. What does make the most difference to schools and students? Our staff are overwhelmed by the number of things in the framework. You know, we had a lot of things. So if I'm looking at that, I'm thinking of the word focus. We need to get focused and make things clear, consistent, and eliminating redundancy. Those were the three themes that came out of that qualitative study. KESA needs to be clarified, it needs to be consistent, and we need to eliminate the redundancy that's inherent in KESA. So let's talk a little bit about past, current, and future KESA. And again, once we're through this, I'm going to turn it over to Amber, and she's going to take you through that current state of this year. So we often don't give KESA enough credit, if you ask me. There were a lot of really good things that came out of that first cycle of KESA. We listed them here on this slide. This is probably not an all-inclusive list, but you saw a more holistic assessment of all aspects of students' learning experiences. You know, before, where you had maybe a checklist to be accredited in Kansas, those assurances, this was a much broader range and look under maybe all the nooks and crannies in a school district in terms of the student's learning experience. There was a much higher level of rigor in what it means to be accredited in Kansas. There was that big, heavy focus on process and outcomes. But you could definitely say from previous accreditation models, KESA was much more rigorous, much more. And we want to build on that. One thing that KESA did that we talked to Amanda Peterson, our director for early childhood here at KSDE, really bridged that gap between early childhood experiences and learning expectations in kindergarten. There was an intense focus on learning outside the school walls, work-based learning experiences, project-based learning, internships. There's been a huge growth through the last 6-7 years of students. And that's just wonderful work that you're doing. Wonderful work that's taking place in our schools across Kansas. And then also one of these more, I guess, nuanced parts that we saw is a real strong growth in a systemic approach to tiered systems of support, not just a tiered system of support in one building that's really knocking off the charts, but a systemic approach to that through the advent of a lot of universal screeners. So we're knowing more about our students. We're growing in our depth of what our students need to grow. Past KESA also was about a lot of things. There were a lot of things to KESA. And we know that when you looked at the report for KESA, all of these were listed as individual aspects. That's a lot of things. And so we want to codify that, bring that together, really make that clear about what does make the most difference for schools and students, and then make that happen. Now, we're not going to get into much of that today. Again, October will be when we really release the accreditation criteria as we move forward. But we do want you to know that we know that this is an issue with focus, and we're going to do our darndest to make sure that focus is there. And so past KESA also was unclear, like I said, an unclear focus. The messaging at times may have been competing a little bit, maybe conflicting, maybe confusing. There was a lot of variability in the OVT. We heard this from systems. We had a really strong OVT. We couldn't find people to be part of our OVT, right? This was more of a dog and pony show. those kinds of things. And we own that. I mean, we provide the training for OVTs. So we need to own that and make sure that third party collaboration, whatever that looks like, needs to be much stronger, much more standardized and much more impactful for systems. There was a large volume of reporting. This was loud and clear. So thank you for that. You have a lot of data from the first cycle that needs to be brought forward, but there was a large volume of reporting, obviously, in that first version of KESA. And there were obviously technical issues with the KESA app that we were completely dissatisfied with. When that app was built, it was not built to function as it was supposed to be in the last few years. So the KESA application, we've got to fix for that. So currently, what we want to really dive into today is the learning year. We're calling this a learning year for 23-24. There are a lot of things to learn this year. It's a transitional year for systems to adapt to the revised accreditation criteria, again, that will be announced in October, that will be fully in place in 24-25. So this is a transition year where everybody has a chance to adapt to and learn the new accreditation criteria. That accreditation criteria, we'll learn more about that as we go. KSDE will learn, our team will learn, and we will then fine tune it and have it in place for all systems in 24-25. We also this year are implementing more what we're calling KESA touch points. And Sarah and Amber will hit on those. The purpose of that learning year, again, and we've heard people refer to it as a pause. It is not a pause. I think there are several administrators, teachers across the state that get insulted when they hear, oh, just because maybe systems aren't going through the ARC means that we're not doing anything this year. That couldn't be further from the truth. It is not a pause year. We're learning and growing. It's a transition from the first cycle of KESA to an enhanced model of KESA that will refocus on the priorities of KSDE and the state board, and we will start that in earnest in 24-25. So we want to allow systems to be able to learn about each accreditation criteria, the refined expectations. It also allows KSDE to interact with all of you and listen to you and learn more about those components, how they're being interpreted, how they're being implemented, and so that we can really have them refined and ready to go in 24-25. And then KESA 2024 and beyond, this is just a high level look. But if you compare that to what was on the slide for past KESA with all the things, it's really going to go back to the process, fundamentals, which are, we're not going to list these out, but it's fundamentals that we all know. It's important for kids to be able to read. It's important for kids to be able to read. It's important for your curriculum to be aligned with standards. It's important for a high functioning evaluation and professional development plan that has high quality instruction at its basis, right? It's important to assess students in multiple ways and look at all that. So those fundamentals are not new. They are not new. This is a continuation of the work that you're doing. It's just a more fine-tuned focus on the fundamentals. And then obviously the student outcomes. That will always be an important piece. So with that, I will turn it over to Amber, and she's going to walk you all through the learning year expectations.
Thank you, Jay. Okay, so here's what we've all been waiting for. I want you guys to know, as I've worked with many of you over the past 6 years in KESA, we know, and I know just how hard you've worked and been working, and the progress that you've all made in moving your systems forward in these challenging conditions we've had over the last couple of years. We want you to know that we plan to honor your work and validate your work in this next cycle, as Jay has said, just to refine the work and be more focused on moving forward with our student outcomes. So with that, here we have the learning expectations for systems for the school year of 2023-2024. We want you to, again, have time to adapt to the revised accreditation criteria before it's actually in place in 24-25. So we want you to continue working toward your goal setting goals, looking at your data, refining your goals, making sure that they're smart and making sure that they are student-centered goals. You're going to learn about the new components in an annual KESA check-in, and that will be the regional consultants that will be in your region, and it will be a face-to-face meeting. You'll also have a peer review. In the peer review, Sarah's going to talk about that here in just a little bit, but it's a form of an OVT, but it's more of a collaborative function to help you, again, refine your work in the area of KESA. So you're going to learn about and experience the new components, and you're going to learn about the new accreditation criteria. We're going to be learning about what works for us as well as what works for you. We don't want to overload everybody because we know how much reporting was in place in the first cycle, and we really want to eliminate that redundancy. So this is the support and accountability model. We're going to be refining our process by putting in place these regional consultants. So this is new to the cycle. Each region will have their own regional executive to provide a personalized approach to support you in your work in KESA. Currently, Sarah Perryman is the regional executive for Northeast systems, and those are the systems in the light green there, in the darker green, I guess is what you'd say, in the top right-hand corner. And I'm going to be the regional consultant for the Northwest systems. That's the gray area. We're currently actively looking for executives in the Southwest and Southeast regions. Until then, until we actually go out for these one-on-one meetings, which will begin in January of 2024, Sarah will serve as the interim executive for the Southeast region, and I will be the interim for the Southwest region. Jay and Myron are going to focus in on those urban and suburban areas as indicated in orange and light green. We look forward to developing relationships with you and your systems to fully support you in the continuous improvement model. So the KESA check-ins, I'm super excited about these. This is an exciting addition to the KESA model, and it's an one-on-one KESA check-in face-to-face in your district on your timeline. And our mission, again, is to ensure expectations are met in process and student outcomes through individual support and accountability. The check-in, again, will occur between January through May of 2024, and we'll contact you via email to schedule your date so you make sure that your KESA contacts are correct. The check-in will ensure that everyone is on track, and we'll discuss your process, including your data analysis, your goals and their measures, as well as timeframes and the qualitative and quantitative data surrounding student outcomes in academic preparation, high school graduation, and post-secondary success, as well as the implementation and the impact of your data to hit progress in these areas. The meetings are going to be about 1.5 hours to 2 hours long, and just make sure that your superintendent, your KESA contact, and any other pertinent DLT members are there, especially building leaders. Ideally, we look for a team of 3 to 10. There's a fact sheet in the resources that Sarah will share with you at the end of the session, where you can, for your reference, where you can reiterate any of these points. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Miss Sarah, and she's going to talk to you about moving from an OVT to a peer review.
Yes, thank you so much. So this year, really, there are 3 expectations for systems. 1, you're collecting that evidence and data of the work that you've done, like Amber articulated. You're meeting with us as your regional executives, and I echo Amber's excitement about coming to meet with each of you individually in your system with your team. And the third piece is continuing what has been in place, which is that third-party accountability meeting. And so we're transitioning from that outside visitation team. It was the outside validation team, then it was the outside visitation team. But we really wanted to rebrand and name this what we think it really is, which is just good peer review, working with your peers to get feedback, to compare notes, to swap strategies and numbers and resources. And we really want to set the context for how we think that meeting is going to be most valuable. And so we're transitioning again from that outside visitation team to a peer review model where we really want to focus on offering choice and flexibility so that the meeting, that interaction can be what we think is its best positioned to be, which is professionals sharing with other professionals. And so we heard through that first cycle that there was a lot of difficulty finding 3 members and finding 3 consistent members and getting folks that were trained and setting a date that worked for everybody. And so we know that one size fits all doesn't always fit all. And so we wanted to, again, add some flexibility and some choice and really set these meetings up to do what they're best positioned to do. And so this year we are, again, giving that flexibility and choice and saying you still need to meet with a peer, but we want to offer some different ways of getting that interaction and getting that feedback. So the last 2 years, we have worked with multiple systems across the state and partnered with our regional service centers to facilitate regional peer reviews. So systems coming together, bringing their work, and then having facilitated conversations throughout the day where you can get feedback on that work. And then you're coming back a couple times throughout the year to follow up and have that accountability, right, built in of saying, here's what we talked about doing last time, here's what we did, here's how it worked, and let's talk about that next step. So maybe that regional peer review model works better for you. Maybe going to your service center and having them facilitated and you just have to register and show up and not have to worry about coordinating or planning meals. Maybe that style of receiving feedback works best for you. Perfect. Choose that. You can also decide that maybe the way that you are working with your OBT right now, you have a really strong team of professionals and it functions in the way it's supposed to, and you don't want to change it, then don't. You can keep that. We're calling that a traditional peer review. That OBT team, if you have it and it's rocking and you don't want to change it, keep with it. We're also offering the opportunity for like systems to meet in a peer review. So we like to use the example of we have some special purpose schools that do specific work for a specific group of kids, and they're very unique, and they might be best positioned to offer feedback to one another since they understand one another best. You might find that, Katina, I'm going to call you out. I'm sorry, you're on my front page. I know you've mentioned that Colby's a little bit bigger than some of those surrounding schools. Maybe you find someone like you and you buddy up and you work with that one other system and you're not having to worry about finding multiple people, right? So again, we're really just focused on what is it that you need to make progress on and how are you going to be best positioned to get the feedback that you need. And choose the model that's going to give you the feedback that you need, whether that be going to a regional service center, whether that be sticking with the team that you have, or finding that peer buddy that you think, man, we're have a lot in common and we're better positioned to give one another feedback. So thinking about what do you need to do now, look at these models, study this fact sheet, and really think about what model is going to work best for you, and start thinking about what's our current state. We will make sure that you know what is it going to look like to engage in this peer review throughout the year. And we also will provide new facilitator training, really focused on what does it look like to facilitate strong conversations, focused on decision-making, focused on critical feedback, focused on action planning. So we really want to make sure that you all feel prepared to facilitate these conversations, whether you're doing that in-house or you're going out to the service center. So that's how we're transitioning from OBT to peer review. And again, our webpage has been updated for that. And I see a question, can peer reviews be virtual? I believe that our service centers are doing, or I know that Greenbush has a virtual cohort. So there can be some options like that. But again, this is a learning year. So we want to test these models. We've been doing that on a smaller scale. We're scaling it statewide. So we really want to make sure that we're learning this year too what works best, so that we can make sure when we put the put this in place in 24-25 that it's the best it can be. So again, this timeline, again, just outlines those 3 big things you're working on this year. So throughout the year, you're collecting that data, that evidence of the work you've been doing to implement a strong process that leads to good results for kids. So that's ongoing work, and we'll continue to provide clarity and support to make sure you're collecting the right things throughout the year. In the spring, like Amber said, we'll start those KSDE check-ins, those KESA one-on-one meetings, and you'll also have that peer review. So those meetings will most likely occur throughout the year, culminating in the end when you will document that feedback from your peers and kind of make those plans of how are you going to use that feedback to continue to grow as you move into next year. So this is just a quick high-level look at what you can expect to do this year and when those tasks should culminate. The next timeline just walks through the actions that the state board is going to have to take that will carry us through this year and start a strong 24-25. So the state board acted on Tuesday to approve the learning year that this year no systems would go through the Accreditation Review Council, the ARC, for a rating, but instead they would be suspended for a year until the new criteria is set. We plan, like Jay mentioned, on rolling out this information at the annual conference in October. So we're going to make sure the state board is aware of that information, and then they will receive it and act on it to close out the year, so that by the end of this calendar, or of this school year, we'll be able to present the state board with some data on how the learning year went. And then we can make sure that the accreditation criteria are ready to go for that 24-25 school year. The resource packet we have for you.
Sorry, Sarah,
go ahead.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I want to make sure a couple points are clear. We did go before the state board this week, and we wanted to make sure they had to approve this learning year because the state board sets the accreditation cycle. And to do what we're trying to do this year, we're trying to revising the criteria. We didn't want any systems that are in year 5 this year going through the ARC for review based on the old criteria. So this is truly a transition year, whereas Sarah said we're suspending or withholding the ARC reviews for the 17 systems that are in year 5 this year. Now, those 17 systems, there are 3 public schools in there, and the rest are all Cognia, using Cognia, which could be public or private. But we've already talked with those 17 systems. They will, and this was approved by the board, they will not be going through an ARC review this year. So everybody is under the same expectations for this year, regardless of the year designation that you have. So I just want to make sure that's clear, that the state board had to act to make sure that we were in keeping with and setting everybody up for success when we start in 24-25. This is a learning year. The other thing I want to clarify, and Amber talked about gathering evidence, data and evidence, right? You are doing that locally. You're storing that locally. You probably already have it. So you are not interacting or inputting anything into the KESA app this year. Okay, the KESA app is a repository, right? It has all your past data, all your year reports in there, your system and yearly reports. You still have access to that all year, but you will not be inputting anything into the KESA app this year. And as we work towards 24-25, we will have a new way of reporting. And so as we go through that, just know that this is a transition year. You will not be interacting and using the KESA app. You'll still have access to it, but you won't need to submit anything to us through the KESA app. I just want to be clear on that.
Appreciate that clarification, Jay, and you did a really great job presenting all of this to the board on Tuesday. So appreciate you being the leader of our team. So this resource packet that is linked, I'm really excited to share this with all of you. So we took all of these fact sheets and information sheets that we've shared throughout, and we put them just into one place and kind of packaged it like the KESA guidance. So everything that we've shared today is in this one packet, so you don't have to worry about where on the website is this fact sheet or that fact sheet. It's all here in the guidance. So you can find our team's vision, our mission, our regional support and contacts, all of those fact sheets around the learning year expectations. So what Amber talked about around gathering those artifacts locally, keeping that local, like Jay just mentioned, what's that expectation for the KESA check-in, the peer review, all of that is in here, including our calendar of events. And then we also updated our compliance documents. So there's nothing new about compliance. Everything that you've been held to is still the same. But we wanted to just add in a little bit more clarity to what does it mean to be compliant versus working towards versus not. Because we know that sometimes it's a little bit gray with our compliance areas, and we just thought that additional level of clarity would be helpful. So the compliance document has been updated. There's nothing new about compliance, but just wanted to bring it to your awareness that there's more information in there to bring clarity, but no new expectations. So again, really excited about this guidance document for this year. All of those resources that we've shared today, everything that's linked all over our webpage in one place there for you. So I would encourage you to print this out and just keep it handy. And we'll make sure that if there are any changes, that this document is always updated and time-stamped. And then the last slide for all of my checklisty people out there, what am I supposed to do right now? What are my next steps? So this slide really is, what do you need to do from now until that KESA criteria is rolled out October 27th at the annual conference? Well, first things first, figure out how do you want to engage in your peer review? Do you really like your OVT? Cool, keep it, talk to them. Make sure you know what that expectation is. If you want to do something different, talk to your service center, talk to a peer near you, figure out what do you need to make progress on, and how are you going to be best positioned to get the support you need. So determine what do you need to do to engage in that peer review this year. The next thing you'll want to think about is, what is your current state? I think we've got one more click. There we go. What's your current state? As Amber was saying, thinking about all of the work that you've done around goals, what data do you have? So just really trying to orient, where are we right now? What is our student data telling us? What is our qualitative data telling us? Where are we as it relates to process and outcomes right now? Then these next few actions, you'll notice these are gray boxes because these are things that we're committed to supporting you with. So you're going to start engaging in that peer review because we know that many of our service centers are hosting these meetings throughout the year. So if you're going to a service center, you'll probably start engaging in those meetings. But again, those will be supported. We will be sure to send out some information about that KSDE check-in. As Amber said, those are going to start in the spring, and so we want to get those scheduled early. So we will be contacting you to make sure that we get all of those scheduled. So don't stress about that. We will be sure to contact you about setting up that visit. We'll also start those monthly updates again in October, so they always will try to coincide with the board meeting. So we'll be putting out that information, making sure that anything that you need to know is presented at those monthly updates. And this kind of quarter culminates with rolling out that KESA criteria at the fall conference. And that will take us to January of kind of kicking off that 24 year, knowing that 24-25 is going to be big for us. And then I think we've got 2 more clicks, Jay. those weekly superintendent Zooms, anything that you need to know, we will be sure to communicate consistently through there. And then on our next click, we'll also be picking back up the KESA monthly newsletter. So again, all of our communication resources can be in one spot in one place, and you're not having to dig and find. So we will continue this timeline October 27th to make sure you know what to do between that annual conference in January 21. But hopefully this slide can be a grounding document for you of what do you need to do right now? What are those things you can count on receiving from us? And just know that we're here to support you along the way.
Thank you, Sarah. And as always, we are an email away, a phone call away, ready to support you. You can, the easiest way to make sure you contact us through email is just using this accreditation@ksde.org. It goes to the entire team. The other thing is you should be expecting, all systems should be expecting their regional executive or their cohort lead to be reaching out to them to start curating some information from the systems in that. It's really kind of a logistics thing to get a feel for, hey, this is your regional executive. Here's some, the system providing us some information around, just fundamental things that are going on in your system, just to kind of get that set up. So you should be expecting contact from either your regional executive or the cohort lead for your system. We know this was a lot today. I'm looking in the chat for questions. Yes, Angela Cooper, Flint Hills USD 492 is here, and that's the entire district is on today. So you guys get the participation award. Thank you for joining us, Stafford. It's great to be on. The fall conference is in Wichita, as it typically is. It's October 26th to the 28th. Actually, I think it's the 27th is the Friday. So I think it's the 25th to the 27th, I believe. We need to check that. But the Friday morning of the last half day of the annual conference will be our KESA rollout. We're really talking in depth about the accreditation criteria moving forward.
Yep. So I wanted to clarify two things. Appreciate these questions coming through in the chat. As we mentioned with the KESA application, that will not be used this year by all systems. If you are working through areas for improvement, AFIs from the ARC, so you were conditionally accredited, if you are working through those AFIs, complete those and turn those in. If that means that you need to do something in the application, you will still follow your AFIs and you will still work with the ARC to rectify those. There just won't be those 17. So systems that have been conditionally accredited will still work to address their AFIs, will still work with us to get that status redetermined by the ARC and the state board, but that would be the only exception to that suspension of ARC reviews. There was another question about expectation for Cognia systems. So Cognia systems will continue to work with Cognia and meet the expectations set by Cognia. For systems that were expecting to complete their Cognia review next year and have a KESA review next year, you'll still complete your Cognia review, but your review by the Accreditation Review Council, the ARC, will happen in the fall of 24, in that 24-25 school year. So we meet with Nancy and Ann pretty regularly, and I believe Nancy also clarified that expectation in the chat, but we'd be happy to talk with folks individually more specifically at another time.
Excellent. Thank you, Sarah. Well, just to, and looks like the resource packet link, we'll make sure we get that in the chat. As we wrap up today and give you some time back in your day. Thank you again for joining us. Again, the expectations for this year, we're talking current KESA for 23-24, is you just need to gather evidence and data of continuous improvement locally. You don't need to put anything into the KESA app. There will be a KSDE check-in, a KESA check-in, with someone from KSDE, the regional executive or the cohort lead, and then that peer review that formerly known as the OVT, is now the peer review. That's really it in a nutshell in terms of the expectations. I hope you know this is a continuation of the work you've been doing, right? We're going to continue and create momentum as you move forward. We want you, hopefully you're clear on these expectations for this year and what's coming out in as we approach this year. So if you're not clear, call us, contact us. We can walk through this with you because we know it's a lot. And then we also want you, hopefully you were affirmed in that hopefully this is more clear, it's more consistent, and it is eliminating the redundancy that has been kind of part of the KESA system as we move forward. So thank you for your time. We are recording this. We will send this out. I believe the PowerPoint, yes, the slides are there. And we will sign off for the day. Thank you so much. Appreciate your time. Have a great rest of your day.